We've been hosting this event since 2009 was the first one that we did. And the way that we started the event was really random because 20 years ago, February 2005, I started Alpine Property Management here in Indianapolis, and I was running away from California. I did my first deal in Hemet, California. Anybody know where that is? Any Californians? Okay, so who's heard of Palm Springs? Okay, so on the other side of the mountain in the same kind of desert from Palm Springs is a retirement community called Hemet. Palm Springs was where all the rich people retired, and Hemet was where the poor people retired. And Hemet started as a manufactured home retirement community in Southern California in Riverside County. And there are neither palms nor springs in Hemet. It's just desert, right? And so I'm teaching in high school in 2000, and I love teaching. I feel like teaching and coaching is my superpower. I'm still the high school volleyball coach out in Idaho. You can tell the joy, right? I love teaching and coaching. As a high school coach over the last 25 years, I've won 2 state championships. My wife teases me that we had this big $100 million real estate operation. And I think the thing that I'm most proud about this last year was that I was named the Idaho Coach of the Year. So, and isn't it interesting what our buzz comes from? You know, you think when you're poor, as a poor high school teacher, I thought, well, man, I want to be rich. Like that's gonna really changed my life. And then you realize that money's cool, right? I have a nonprofit now. We sponsored 30 volleyball teams this year in our club. Gave a lot of scholarships out. We have some kids that we're paying for scholarships for college to play right now. But it's funny how who's found that money is only a vehicle to help you help others? Who's found that in their lives? That's an interesting thing. Like if I could deposit $100 million in your account, who would take that money and use it for your kids or your family or something you're passionate about? Who would probably channel most of it to something else? So that's an interesting thing that I found. So I stumbled on a book in 2000 called Rich Dad Poor Dad. Anybody read that? And this whole idea of passive income was something I had never thought about because I grew up with a W-2 parent. Who had a W-2 parent? And his parents mistakenly taught them that you save your way to retirement, right? Be a saver. I remember when I was little, I had like my little money box, my 3-compartment piggy bank, and there was like 10% to God, 10% for savings, 80% for fun, right? And that was like literally how my parents did their money. And which was understandable because my dad was actually from here in Indianapolis. I think we go back like 6 or 7 generations here to like 1850s, and before that was Kentucky. So I come from a proud white trash hillbilly heritage of blue collar misunderstandings about money. And we all who is finding as an adult that the lessons that your parents and that you were taught in the schools are not serving you from a money standpoint? Who's finding that? Right? Like this whole idea of saving versus investing. Like savings, somebody said to me, well, savings, well, rich people don't have savings. They have liquidity. What's liquidity? It's it's cash that I need to keep on hand. But nobody has savings in the poor people standpoint where you're saving for when you retire or saving for a rainy day, because what rich people do is they keep some cash on hand, but what do they want all the rest of their money to be? Invested, right? They want their money invested, paying them. I have a friend of mine named Nick who he and his dad manage $1 billion in rich people money. And they've been doing it's generational. Nick's dad does it. Now Nick's taking over the business. And he sent me a prospectus this week. Who's heard of Blackstone? Who's heard of Blackstone, right? And when you hear of Blackstone, anybody want to share who or what they are? When you hear the name Blackstone, what's Blackstone?
Investment conglomerate.
Big investment company. Anyone else? Who's heard of Blackstone?
Field.
What kind of business are they? Private equity. Who's heard like private equity, but who's never invested in private equity? Okay. And has anybody invested in private equity? Okay. And so Blackstone's private equity, and they just rolled out their Capital Partners 9 fund, right? It's like they raised like $20 billion. And I was talking to my buddy Nick, and he's gonna be here Sunday, and I said, I'd like to put some money into that. And usually the minimum investment for that's $5 million. Well, you have to be, your net worth has to be $5 million, and you got to put at least $1 million in, and then it's tied up for a couple of years. And why would a rich person put their money with Blackstone? What kind of returns do you think you're making a year with them? 10, 15, 20, 25%. Okay. Now you don't have control. It's locked up for a while. It's certainly subject to market volatility if Blackstone makes a bad decision with the money. But that's the kind of difference. You know, I think of my grandparents here in Indianapolis. My grandpa came home from World War II, and then he got a job at Naval Avionics here in town. It's like a plant that makes instruments for the Navy, for ships. And he had these little certificates on his wall of different types of machines he learned to use at Naval Avionics. And my grandparents were big in their garden, and then he had his pension, and they basically had a middle-class working life, and then they dropped down a whole segment and had a blue-collar retirement, okay? Who had parents or grandparents that did that kind of path, okay? And as a high school teacher back in 2000, I started realizing that there's these two worlds of money. There's rich people and their money. There's middle-class people and their money, and there's poor people and their money. And what's interesting is that I had this epiphany, is that your income, the amount of money you make, is also tied to a mindset. And so as a 5-figure income earning high school teacher making $40,000 a year, I realized there were beliefs about money, my money, how to make money, how to build money, how to grow money, that literally were keeping me at a 5-figure income until I learned 6-figure income principles. So can anybody think of, has anybody made 6 figures, but then you never went back down to 5 figures? Is anybody in that situation? Okay. So you made 100,000 or more, you never made less than that, unless you got sick or something like that. But what would be an example of a mindset principle you had to learn that got you up to that 6-figure income and helped keep you there?
Borrowing money is okay.
Borrowing money is okay. Love that one. Because if you listen to Dave Ramsey, borrowing money is evil, right?
Yeah.
Like, freeze your credit cards. He teaches kind of like all debt is bad. He doesn't exclusively teach that. I do like some of Dave's stuff. But if you're a poor person and you only use debt for liabilities, then debt's bad, right? Because what's the rich people attitude about debt? There's good debt and bad debt, right? What would be an example of good debt? What's that? Yeah, why would debt on a real estate? Right. I love, who's heard of Toby Mathis? Okay. Toby's a really bright guy. I think Toby gives the best explanation of good debt and bad debt from the standpoint that it's an asset if it pays you. If it pays you, it's an asset. If it doesn't pay you, it's a liability. So if you buy a home and you're putting together a balance sheet, they'll let you list your home as an asset, right? Because it has equity, it has value. But if you don't Airbnb your home, then your home really is a liability, isn't it? Because your home doesn't pay you. It can have equity, which you could, cash when you sell it. But, I like the very narrow scope that Toby teaches about, if it doesn't actually pay you, then it's not. So like gold. Gold's interesting because gold has value, gold's gone up. But gold doesn't pay you. In fact, you have to pay for what with gold? You got to pay to store it. So investing in gold would actually be more like buying a rental property, boarding it up. What's your storage costs on a rental property? Insurance and taxes, right? Those are fixed things that you have to pay for to keep that property. Just like if you keep gold, you got to pay to keep it in a vault somewhere. That's your storage cost. So buying a rental property, boarding it up, and hoping it goes up in value. Doesn't that sound stupid? That's what gold is. Gold's not an investment. Gold for rich people is what? A hedge, or it's part of their liquidity. Right? So I like the idea of saying, okay, you know, what's a liquidity amount that wealthy people try to target? Has anybody heard that one? Let me bring this up here. Okay, so let's see if we got this on here. Oops. Okay, so the top 1%. Oops. They have a 30, 30, 10 asset allocation. If you look at how the top 1% of Americans, the wealthiest Americans, divide up their net worth, divide up their retirement, divide up the things that they have. They want 10% cash. That's their liquidity. Most of them put about 30% into the market. They put 30% into real estate, and they put 30% into private equity. Feels like the Blackstone fund. If you don't have access to private equity, then I would say, or a business. Either you start a business or you invest passively in somebody else's business. Okay. Now, the reason that the wealthiest Americans tend to diversify their money this way is because if the market crashes, then you still have your real estate portfolio, you still have your rentals. When the market crashed in 2008, I had been here for 3 years. I had a house, just as an example, that I had bought over near the Indianapolis 500 Speedway. I bought it for $80,000, rented it for $900 a month. So I was making like 8% off that rental. It was a good little rental. Market crash in 2008, the value of that house went down to 20 grand. But guess what didn't drop? The rent. Okay. Think about who remembers 2009, 2010. Okay. I would be on a flight and people would say, "What do you do for a living?" I say, "I'm a real estate investor." And they'd be like, "Oh, I'm sorry for your loss," you know, because so many developers got destroyed in 2008 because we were overbuilt by 4 million homes. Banks went under because they had made a lot of bad mortgage loans. Who remembers all those toxic liar loans and subprime mortgages? Okay. And think about Warren Buffett's quote about fear. What does he say? When others are fearful, be greedy. And when others are greedy, be fearful. Like, I think it's a Warren Buffett quote when he said, "When my taxi driver is giving me stock picks, then I sell my stocks and get out of the market." And every Uber driver, I hate to tell Uber drivers I'm in real estate because they are too. I just drive because I like it. Okay, yeah. But I'm in real estate. I have a license, or I have a rental, or I have an Airbnb, and you know, and so when when the market crashed, my house over by Speedway went down to 20K. Did we as a country want to be renters or did we want to be homeowners in 2009? We wanted to be renters. Nobody wanted to buy because everyone was afraid we were going to have another crash. And when you look back historically, when the stock market crashes, the rental pool goes up. What's happening right now with homeowners and renters with our economy? What do you think? You think we have more homeowners now or more renters? More renters. More renters. Guys, the new construction builders right now are dying. Okay? Because they all made a fortune between 2000 and 2003 when interest rates were low and they were just killing it. And we were, kind of replacing the housing shortage that we had. But they're freaking out now because mortgage rates are 7%. Their labor, they're getting guys like arrested by ICE on their job sites. Their materials are very volatile. If if you're a builder right now, you're afraid to buy 10,000 doorknobs from China because who knows what the price could be. And so these big builders are like all stopping because they don't want to drop their price. I mean, they had it up to over 400,000 for a new construction home. They don't want to drop that down to 350 and lose. So builders are kind of frozen right now while interest rate. And what happened to the Fed this week? We stayed with no change. Is there any sign that this year interest rates are going to drop? Okay. So a lot of people, if you say, well, how's real estate? Well, it depends on what part of real estate. Are we talking new construction? Because new construction for a big builder is real estate's horrible right now. But think about me in 2009 here in Indianapolis. So I have this rental property that I'm upside down on. It's worth 20 grand. But in 2009, my rent went from 900 to 950 because there was no rentals. Nobody wanted to buy. Nobody was buying homes. Nothing was on MLS. Everybody was renting. People were still graduating college. Unemployment here was 9%. So employment was 91%. So you had a lot of people working, and we watched this blue-collar rental pool swell. I go to the foreclosure auction in 2009. I'm buying houses in Speedway for $10,000 that I'm renting for $900 a month. Who wants to buy one of those this weekend? I wish I had them. Okay. And so think about a rental property owner in 2009 making 20% off the rents with a list of tenants waiting to rent that property. So the thing you have to understand is there's this perspective about real estate that drives the market, because right now as a landlord, as somebody who provides blue-collar affordable housing to people, guys, this is the best time to be in real estate. As somebody who's doing manufactured housing, I can buy a manufactured home for $50 a square foot. I just finished some condos in Idaho that cost me $125 a square foot. So I can buy a manufactured home for 60% less than what I can stick build the same square footage of a home. So as a manufactured home investor, there's never been better opportunity. Okay, think about our boomers right now. Think about our boomers. Our 65 and oldest, I've been tracking a statistic going back to 2010. In 2010, in fact, let me show you guys this chart because this is really indicative of an example of how interesting our economy is right now. It is how you know the difference between a teacher and a public speaker. A teacher skips around on their slides. In 2010, let me just draw it out for you here. One in five 65-year-olds only had Social Security to live off of. That was 2010. Okay, so 20%. It was actually 19%. So 19% of 65-year-olds were only living off of Social Security. And for 60% of them, that Social Security was 70% of their retirement. So basically, our poorest 65-year-olds in 2010 were living off of $1,250 a month. And all the way up to 60% of them, they were living off of, that was still, they were basically living off of 3 to 4K a month. This number really disturbed me, that 1 in 5 had no 401k, had no IRA, had no pension. That's all they had, okay? It's symptomatic of this retirement crisis that we have happening in this country. So I've tracked this statistic every year. And I just looked at it last year in 2024. And 40% of our 65-year-olds last year have, now Social Security is about $1,500 a month. 40% have only Social Security for retirement. That is a huge jump. That's a massive hole. Now, as an investor, I always try to look at something like that and flip it around. So in 2009, I said, well, it sucks that my $80,000 house in Speedway is worth only 20 grand. But the fact that I can go buy more for $10,000 creates an opportunity. So I have one that I'm upside down on, but then I have others that I'm making 20, 25% of my money. I'll just find a way to load up on those. You see the difference? That's an example of a 7-figure mindset. Because what a 5-figure mindset person does, somebody who makes less than 100,000 a year, somebody who's maybe an employee, what they do is say, real estate's bad right now. I don't want to do anything. I need to stay sidelined. Okay? What a 6-figure mindset or a 7-figure mindset person does is say, there's an opportunity here to make a lot of money. The mistake that you can make is to write off a whole asset class of investing like real estate and say it's not good. So how many of you are here this weekend because you want to understand what the opportunities are? You want to see how you can capitalize on those. Right, perfect. That's when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Okay, because that's what I've been doing for 25 years. And the theory that I've maintained is that real estate is this massive river that's running right in front of my house, and all I have to figure out is which ladle or which bucket is the best to get the water out. But the river is always there. There's always opportunity. So think about this statistic with our seniors. What can you think of if 40% of our 65-year-olds are broke? What becomes an opportunity that you can think of?